Welcome back, folks, and thanks for all the engagement in this RX-8 prep series. We're going to wrap up this initial series with one that focuses on weight reduction, aerodynamic modifications, and a few miscellaneous tweaks that go a long way towards enhancing performance. Now, the RX-8 has always lived in the shadows of the FD RX-7, and not just for power. Everyone has always pointed out that the RX-8 is just so much heavier than the RX-7. But is that perspective justified? When you really start to look into it, the true weight difference between those two platforms, I believe, is blown way out of proportion. An early Series 1 base model is only around 2880 to 2960 depending on the fuel load. With a few simple tweaks, my 2007 Sport model with the DSC is down into the mid 2800 pound range, 2850 or so. And my earlier 2005 white car that was a base model was in the mid 2700 pound range. That was with full interior air conditioner, stereo. Those weights truly are comparable to the FD, and they're actually pretty incredible if you take into consideration that the RX-8 has more headroom, real rear seats, bigger brakes, more safety, and a much more rigid chassis. Mazda already went through really great lengths to control the weight of the RX-8 through their gram strategy. That includes things like an aluminum hood and rear doors, carbon fiber drive shaft on the 6-speed models, aluminum front control arms, aluminum rear knuckles, and hollow sway bars. Now, I'm going to start with what you all want to hear, which is a list of RX-8 weight savings opportunities and target weights, but then I'll talk about why it really shouldn't matter. I'll note that much of this data comes from the RX-8 forum, particularly some of the old SEC8 STX build threads. First things first, if you already own your RX-8, then you're kind of stuck with what you've got. But if you're really worried about weight reduction, the early base models, the ones that don't have the dynamic stability control, are the lightest of the bunch, clocking in as low as 2880 pounds. If you've got a later Grand Touring model with leather, with sunroof, expect to be north of the 3,000 pound range. Now, in this table, I've broken it up into two sections. The first is streetable builds. Some of it might be a little bit hardcore, but it's stuff that people could daily. And in the right columns, I'm indicating whether that's street or sport legal, or whether it's street touring or tuner legal. Some of these modifications are simply removing a component. Some of these are substituting with something that weighs less. First up are the really cheap, easy things that you can simply remove. You can remove the floor mats, the tow hooks, the jack, the OE-provided tire inflator kit, and the engine cover, and empty out all of the fluid in the windshield washer. Less gas in the tank is worth easily 60 to 70 pounds or so versus full. In terms of low-hanging fruit, where you can substitute something that saves a lot of weight, there is the exhaust system. The OE catback is about 39 pounds. Keep in mind some venues have sound limits and rotaries tend to be on the louder side. The OE wheels are about 21.5 pounds, give or take. You can substitute lighter wheels in sport and street touring, but they have to be made of metal and there are some size limits. The OE battery is a hefty chunker at 38 pounds. Aftermarket lead versions might be in the teens or 20 pounds, or you could get down into the single-digit pounds with some of the lithium batteries on the market. The factory seats are 37.5 pounds each for cloth. The leather seats weigh more, and the R3 seats weigh more. Keep in mind, if you do swap a seat, street touring has a lower weight limit of 25 pounds with brackets. In terms of brakes, you can go with lighter aluminum calipers and lighter rotors. Coilovers with aluminum bodies and shorter springs will shave some weight. The OE mid-pipe with the cat is fairly heavy at 23 pounds. You can substitute a mid-pipe, but street touring requires 100 cells per inch cat. The OE intake with the VFAT is 14 pounds. Aftermarket cold air intakes or even the Racing Beat Revy will shave a couple of pounds, but keep in mind, you can't modify the splash tray. The OE head unit is particularly heavy. You could substitute in a single DIN aftermarket head unit. The exhaust manifold is 17.6 pounds. You could substitute a tubular steel header. OE flywheel is 17 pounds. Lightweight flywheels can shave some weight there. The last three on this list are streetable mods but are not legal for street touring. You could remove the engine lifting brackets. There's a 3-pound weight that hangs off the bottom of the transmission that I assume is there for noise, vibration, and harshness. NC Miata brakes, which are light, super cheap, and will reduce unsprung weight and rotating mass. At this point, if you were to do all of the things that are legal for street touring, Figure most RX-8s will be in the 2,700 to 2,800 pound range. Moving on to the next list are things that are not recommended for a daily driver or a street-driven car. You can remove the rear seats, although there's not a lot of weight savings to be had there, although you'll hear a lot more noise from the fuel pump in the road. The factory AC system only weighs about 18 pounds, but in my opinion, it's worth every pound. The air pump, if you've gotten rid of the cat, can be removed for 5 pounds weight savings. Racing clutches that are small diameter are generally lighter. Of course, once you start to get to this point, you could consider things like gutting the interior, paneling, sound deadening, and insulation. You could rip out the speakers, the stereo. The OE crash bars could be removed for a race car only, although even then I might not recommend it. The rear seat belt assemblies, any miscellaneous brackets. You could switch to carbon fiber body parts. You could gut the doors, take out the windows, really for a race car only with a roll cage. Now, weights of cars with that level of preparation vary quite a bit, although most of the really hardcore serious race cars seem to clock in the 25 to 2,600 pound range, a little bit higher if you've got a well-built cage. We'll start with things that I won't dispute as near universal truths of weight reduction. You'll get less tire and brake system wear and tear. You'll have less rolling resistance and better gas mileage. You will directly improve acceleration, F equals ma, so yes, you're going to go faster on straights. And you'll have less stress on suspension components, wheels, the chassis, pretty much everything. Now you might be thinking, but wait, you forgot cornering and braking. I mistakenly used to think, oh hey, if I can get my car 10% lighter, it'll go 10% faster around the track, right? False. Now race car dynamicists are familiar with the expression of cornering coefficient, which describes the relationship between cornering force and the weight, the vertical force, pressing that tire into the pavement. Over a fairly wide range of corner weights, that relationship is fairly linear. So in this plot, what this is saying that as you add more weight to that tire, the more weight pushing down on it, you almost get proportionately more tire grip. Take for instance this data comparing my dad's 2020 WRX to my RX-8, both using the same set of 255/40 Kumo V730s that we swapped off. Now assume each car was driven pretty close to the limit. When we look at this plot, we can see the cornering speeds and the cornering G-forces are nearly identical between these two cars, despite the fact that the WRX is a lot heavier, has a strut suspension, less ideal alignment, and proportionately more mass on the front tires. I've also given rides to passengers at autocrosses, granted where you spend more time cornering and braking than you do accelerating compared to a circuit, and driving as consistently as possible with weights of passengers ranging from about 150 pounds to 260 pounds, the impact has largely been in the noise. I regularly pax in the top 10 and I've set quite a few track records, so if weight reduction is in the noise of my driving, unless you're a pro, it's probably within the noise of your driving too. All tires have an optimal temperature window over which they provide the best performance. Lightweight cars can actually have a tough time in sprint conditions like autocrosses and cold temperatures of getting enough heat in those tires to get them into that window. Weight can actually be your friend at helping to generate tire temperature and tire grip. Bottom line folks, yes, weight reduction does provide a lot of advantages, but more so on courses with long straightaways. And don't expect anything outside of truly huge weight reductions to change your finishing position much. Focus on the driver mod first and spend the money on more useful stuff. Moving on from weight reduction and talking about entry-level aerodynamics. I used a home-brewed Aero package on my white RX-8 for a single season while I was running SCCA Street Prepared and Max categories. It was quite effective and entirely custom, and it did take a while to fabricate over the winter of 2020. Both my front splitter with an integral air dam and my rear spoiler were custom pieces made from 1/2-inch thick Baltic birch plywood. For a while it seemed like most splitters out there were custom and there wasn't a lot on the commercial market. But now it seems like there's more specialty speed shops that are appearing to offer fairly comprehensive splitter kits like the one I'm showing here. There's a fast SCCA 13B REW swap that runs this solution. Now, due to the low nature of splitters, if you're trying to load your car up onto a trailer, you're going to need either really long ramps or you might need a quick disconnect splitter to ease getting onto the trailer. Also be careful of pulling into parking spots with tall curbs. The home-brewed splitter and spoiler package worked really well for both time attack and hill climbs, generating enough downforce to take me from about 92 to 93 miles per hour through turn 10 at VIR to pushing 98 to 99 miles per hour. Not bad for plywood and Home Depot engineering. As a bonus, a well-engineered splitter and air dam helps to improve cooling as well by helping to trap high-pressure air and force it in through the mouth of the front bumper. Now, if rules allow, a better option than the spoiler that I homebrewed would be a GT-style wing, which is going to provide more downforce for a given amount of drag. In particular, APR has a really nice piece that they say bolts to the trunk in the OE spoiler hole location in the GTC 200 style. And it's a very nice piece that generates legitimate downforce levels for a very minor weight impact. The purist out there might be interested in the Mazda Speed rear wing spoiler combination. From what I hear, the Mazda Speed piece is functional, but don't expect the same downforce levels as a GT style wing. Folks who are familiar with my channel know that I run the factory appearance package front lip and the OE rear wing. I don't know if either of those are truly functional, but that front lip is quite a bit stronger and a bit more reinforced than the base piece, so if you're a cone smasher, it might be an advantage. Now, I've heard anecdotes that the Series 2 front bumper cover might produce a little bit more downforce at the front of the car. The Mazda Speed front body kit for the Series 1 also might have some aerodynamic advantages, in addition to opening up some cooling to the oil coolers. Trimming the rear bumper cover below the fascia pieces is pretty popular with the Japanese time attack crowd and might help reduce the parachute effect at the rear of the car. Hood venting is a popular option, especially in hotter climates. I've used hood vents on my RX-8s and on Miatas. You have to be careful where you choose to install the vents so that you've got low pressure above them and high pressure below them to help scavenge heat out of the engine bay. You might also need a means to seal them up when it rains. They improve cooling, reduce drag, and help with heat extraction when the fans are running there in grid. Now, these are just the basics. You can go wild with diffusers, front dive planes, and more if you're really into a no limits time attack build. Now, if you go down the Aero route, err on the side of stability that is a little bit more downforce in the back than the front. The ideal setup is a car that's stable and the high speed turns, the fast stuff like turn 10 at VIR and turn 4 at Summit Point, but then as you slow down, you get the Aero package having a little bit less effect, and the mechanical grip bias can then allow the car to be a little bit freer, a little bit more neutral. That's how I had my white car dialed in with that big rear spoiler and a fairly modest front splitter. Lastly, speaking from personal experience, please beware of cheap Aero parts. I ran a cheap front lip on my old white RX-8, and it failed on track just from the Aero loading on the straightaway. Stick with quality, strong aerodynamic parts and don't end up like the legendary racer Bruce McLaren, who died testing a Can-Am car when the bodywork failed and caused a fatal crash. Moving on to seats and harnesses. This is pretty solidly in the track car build category, as racing seats usually impact the comfort and usability of the car. That said, a racing seat truly is a performance upgrade because it helps the driver to maintain better control of the car by keeping them in place behind the steering wheel and the pedals. Now, the RX-8 has a structural beam that runs transversely between the transmission tunnel and the door sills under each front seat, and that can limit how far you can go with some race seats. Unfortunately, many aftermarket seat rail kits don't allow the seat to be mounted any lower than stock. Some of them might even mount an aftermarket seat higher. So beware which combinations you choose if headroom for you is tight. If all you need is a little bit more headroom, install extended bolts at the rear of the seat pan, which allows you to drop the OE seat about an inch or so. I run this setup and have just enough headroom in a non-sunroof car for my helmet. If you're a tall person and ever owned a Miata, you're probably familiar with the concept of foamectomies. But that said, I generally like to avoid that as much as I can because I've usually found the foamectomy reduces the comfort of the seat. If going low is your goal, Kirky seats seem to offer the best opportunity for lowering, but in my experience, they flex considerably more than a composite seat and should be used with a seat back brace. Now, for performance driving, simply being able to lock your hips in the seat is a huge performance benefit. There used to be a product from CG Lock that would lock the factory 3-point seatbelt, although products made for child seat mounting might do the trick as well. Alternatively, I run a Rally 3 harness from Schroth that bolts in and can be used with the factory seat. Now, I would never recommend a harness with anything less than 6 points unless it has integrated ASM, anti-submarine technology, which was pioneered by Schroth. The Rally 3 harness bolts into the factory seatbelt hard points. For the shoulders, it bolts to the rear deck upper seatbelt reel bolt. On the outboard side, it bolts to the seatbelt sliding rail bolt. And for the inner lap, it bolts where the factory seatbelt receptacle bolts to the seat. This setup unclips and stows for street use, but clips into place during racing, and really helps to hold you better into the OE factory seat which again allows for better vehicle control on left foot braking. I use a seatbelt dummy plug to trick the car into recognizing that I'm still wearing my seatbelt. 6-point harness installs are going to require know-how and fabrication capabilities. Just like the Schroth, you can utilize the outboard factory seatbelt rail mounting bolt for one of the lap attachments, but almost all of the other attachment points require either attaching to a roll bar or a roll cage, or drilling through the seat pan and using reinforcement backup plates with eyelet mounts to clip into. Left foot braking, which I feel is an overpowered racing technique, is pretty much impossible without some combination of the modifications I just reviewed to lock your hips in place. A nice modification to improve the reach to the OE steering wheel is a steering wheel extender. You get to retain the airbag, cruise, and radio controls, but you do get that easier reach for more precise wheel control. Now, if your class allows and you don't mind losing those features, you could put on a racing steering wheel. That might save weight, allow you to adjust the reach to your liking, and the smaller diameter feels like it helps to speed up the steering a bit. At this point, you should have enough information to build a reliable RX-8 that handles with the best in the world, stops reliably no matter what, and delivers more smiles per gallon than any other platform I know. Now, no one person can get everything right in a single video series, so I've started a post on the RX8 Club forums to capture corrections, comments, and clarifications on this entire video series, and I'm capturing all of your guys' feedback from the comments and pulling the critical stuff into that post. See the link in the video description if you want to check it out. I've got ideas for other content types that I'll try to release prior to the racing season, so stay tuned and I hope to see you then.